Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you while you were alone? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I, female, was in a gas station bathroom in downtown Memphis while my male friend was pumping gas. The bathroom was at the back of the gas station, so not visible from my car. I was using the toilet when I heard two men speak to each other very quietly on the other side of the locked bathroom door. Now, this was before cell phones were ubiquitous, so I couldn't text my friend and let him know what was going on. I decided to do my best to make a break for it. So instead of flushing the toilet, when I was done, I very quietly went and unlocked the bathroom door, flung it open, and walked straight out at a quick speed before cutting a sharp right to get back to the gas pumps. Sure enough, there was a man standing on either side of the doorway. Door opened in, not out, waiting for me. One of them said something like, "Hey, come here," and I said, "No thanks," and kept walking. Being terrifying, honestly. I'm so glad I had great hearing and listened to my gut instinct. Was taking a small sailboat literally 10 nautical miles up the coast when I was about 16 and encountered a bit of weather. I was experienced, but not super experienced. Slipped while getting up and got hit in the back of the head with a boom hard enough to get knocked out. Didn't get the sail down, obviously, and capsized. Woke up in the water maybe 20 feet from the boat. Fortunately, there was no hold or cabin, and so the boat stayed afloat, and I was able to cling to it and ultimately right it. But there's nothing like being A, unconscious in the water, and B, waking up seeing your boat drifting away in a squall. I guess a closest second would be breaking my collarbone on a small island I'd kayaked to, realizing I was incapable of kayaking back. Working as a young adult on a geriatric unit, I was doing a night shift, and we have to do solo hourly rounds to make sure everyone is breathing, respirations. The unit at the time had installed privacy curtains around each bed, 4 beds to a room. Went to one dorm to check as I was walking around with my flashlight around 3 in the morning. All of a sudden, I pull one of the curtains to check on a patient, and there she was standing right in front of me with these steely metallic blue eyes, and it freaked the shit out of me. "Hello, dearie." Almost shit my pants. I wasn't alone, but was at a friend's house for their birthday party. Their parents ran to the store late at night and left us kids by ourselves. We were watching the Garfield movie when we heard something tap the window. We turned around and saw a man staring in at us, who then proceeded to try to get in the front door. It was locked, so we spent like 10 minutes circling the house, trying to find a way in while we panicked and hid. Eventually, my friend's parents came back and the guy was gone. I never visited that friend's house again. I have high blood pressure and was trying some new blood pressure medication. I took it and I was at home alone when after half an hour I began to feel very sleepy and like I was about to pass out. I didn't know what was happening, but had no energy to even get up. I didn't know if I was having a heart attack or something else very serious. My phone was on my nightstand, and I literally couldn't muster the energy to even get to it. So I lay there panicking, trying to figure out what to do. I ended up passing out and woke up on the floor with my wife shaking me, asking if I was okay and calling 911. Turns out the dosage of the new blood pressure medication was too high, and my blood pressure actually got too low, which can also be dangerous. I was hiking by myself on this network of trails and everything was fine. Then something changed and suddenly I was terrified. I turned around and started walking back to the trailhead. Something told me not to run, but I wanted to badly. I reached the tree line and made it out to the open field. I booked it to my car. 4 weeks later, a lady got killed by a mountain lion on that trail. A smoke alarm went off in the middle of the night, alone with the kids. Heart racing, I jump out of bed, run out of my room, no smoke, run to the basement, still no smoke. So the alarm is screaming so loud and I can't find the fire. Alarm then suddenly stops. In the end, one of the alarms, hardwired, was malfunctioning, but I'll never forget that initial feeling of the house is on fire. Not a single child so much as got out of bed. I'm convinced smoke alarms are useless for children. In my teens, home alone at night, I thought I heard a noise outside, so I carefully peeked back the blinds to take a look. There was a face staring directly at me. I jumped and screamed. Turns out it was my own reflection. Doesn't end there. Heart racing, I decided to go to bed. Went around the house, turning everything off. Suddenly there's a noise right behind me. A horrible, wet, animalistic noise, like somebody screaming with a sore throat. Exactly the kind of sound a special effects director would cook up for a zombie movie. I jumped and screamed again. Turned out it was my parents' water feature they left running. The pump just makes that sound 2 minutes after you turn it off. I never knew. And the wait was long enough that I didn't associate the sound with the action until I gathered enough courage to investigate and figured it out. I didn't sleep well that night. In 1977, my 5-year-old, my mom and stepdad were more concerned about getting effed up anyway possible than being even basic level responsible. 2 instances. Woke up into pitch black and dead silence. Called out, no response. Called again, no response. Started losing it and crying hysterically. Turns out the power had gone out, and they thought it would be bitchin' to go wander around the neighborhood while coked up and a 5-year-old boy left alone in a Fleabag apartment. When they eventually got back, they got mad at me for harshing their buzz and legit not understanding what the problem was at all. I wasn't technically alone in this one, but I was invisible, so I might as well have been. A friend of my mom decided to cook a big old pot of spaghetti with shrooms as the main ingredient. Everyone was completely oblivious to me for 3 full days, as in wandered around bumping into the walls and jabbering to themselves. Luckily, I had learned to cook for myself at 5 years old, so I made all my own meals. But it was like The Walking Dead. They looked like my parents and neighbors, but had no human attributes for 3 days. Funny enough, I heard Mom telling my son about that particular incident when we were eating pizza with mushrooms. Got raging pissed, but she's so husked out mentally, she again just thought it was funny. Don't do drugs, kids.
All right, so this person's a little older than me. I was born in 77, but I was having a conversation with my son the other day about how parenting and life was just different. I remember being a little kid, like 4 or 5, and like sitting on my mother's lap while she was driving our car in the driver's seat, where she'd like smoke a cigarette. It was just, and I know people still do that, and it's cool, but it's just interesting, probably in a good way, how some safety features have enhanced. Like, for instance, I'm an age, and I've never been on a bicycle while wearing a helmet. And now I don't know if kids have ever been on a bicycle without a helmet. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. So, I don't know, just made me think about growing up in the 80s and whatnot. What do you think? Better? Different? Worse?
Driving on one of those bridges built in the 30s that have super narrow lanes, and it was 2 lanes in the same direction, kind of like a proto-interstate, and it was winter. I'm in the right lane and a tractor trailer is next to me in the left. As soon as I got on the bridge, I could feel no traction because of ice. Fortunately, I froze and didn't move the steering wheel or hit the brakes, and eventually was off the bridge and could feel traction. I suspect if I had done something, I'd have gone into either the bridge railing or the truck and not have had a good day. I was 14 when this happened, and I wasn't alone, but my brother was sleeping upstairs. I was downstairs watching TV around 7 p.m. when the light on the stairs suddenly shut off. I got scared, but tried to think positive, so I kept telling myself this bulb must have exploded or something, but I was still a bit scared. As I went up the stairs slowly in the dark, I looked for the light switch, and surprise, surprise, the light was turned off. So I turned it back on while heart just dropped. I knocked on my brother's door, and he answered the door with messy hair and red eyes while squinting and blocking the stair light with his hand because he was sleeping in the dark. That's when I knew it wasn't him, because he was sleeping still. Till today, I don't know what happened. Woke up with 3 dudes with masks and weapons in my room at 3 a.m. First thing I saw was a hand reaching for my wallet beside me on my bed. My first reaction was to jump up and run for the guy who was running to the door, but it was dark and I got hit a bunch with what I thought were punches, but turned out to be guns and other metal objects. I got one guy on the ground, wrestling for a minute, got back up, got hit from behind in the ribs, which took my legs and breath. I remember the cold blood flowing into my mouth, and I walked to the mirror and realized I could see my skull through a gash in my forehead. Drove to the hospital and got treated for 5 lacerations, broken orbital, and broken teeth. The next morning, I found a handle from what must have been a pellet gun pistol, which must have broke when I was hit. I never got my wallet back, and I found out it was a disgruntled, jealous ex who sent some losers to my house to steal my valuables. Nice. Episodes of psychosis where I was no longer in touch with any reality, with a perception shift compared to my social environment. I could not understand anything about them, like they lived in a different world, like I was sleepwalking or woke up in the midst of a scary, strange dream I could not control, and amnesia, scary amnesia afterwards. It is similar with the priors before a seizure. You know you will lose consciousness and control over yourself in the next seconds or minutes, and desperately try to escape. Distract yourself, focus just to avoid what is to come, still knowing that you will eventually have the same disaster you already had before. We were camping in UP near Calumet Mohawk, like right in town basically. Oddly, the campground is completely deserted, and it looks like it was set up in a hurry over the panini. You know the one, the old mining campground right there? The big building looked abandoned, and we started walking around it, realizing, dude, I think someone is living here. Not a big deal. I've seen way worse. We pay it no mind and try not to bother the residents. A couple of days of solitude go by, and we're laying there listening to the rain in the middle of the night, and we hear a truck pull in. We haven't even met any staff. We paid our fee online and just kind of pulled in, so we think maybe it's the owner or something. Then the screeching and screaming starts. Unhinged effing wailing, punctuated by meth rants. The line that stuck out most was, "And that's why I'm having babies and you're not." Actually got a chuckle out of us. But then it just kept going on and on. At some point we heard her get out and start pacing, and we know from experience she's literally off her mind, way too high on the rock. We start getting scared. We didn't make any noise. We didn't even move. We just kept listening, especially when she got back in and drove her truck around the path. We were literally praying she didn't see our bright green tent tucked into the trees. She didn't. On the way home, we stopped in that big forest in the middle of Wisconsin to sleep in the USDA camp outside of Ashland. Those woods are haunted as, for anyone who doesn't know. We smoked a bowl with some shatter on top. It got so high we were scared Bigfoot was going to pop out of the bushes any second. That one was funny. 2 times I thought I was alone. I was 11 and reading on the swings at my elementary school playground, which was accessed a field from my backyard. It was not school hours, so the park was empty, or at least it was until 2 older junior high boys yanked my arm behind my back and forced me to pull my pants and underwear down. They didn't do anything worse, but it was scary and violating and mortifying. Anyway, even if it wasn't full-on SA, it was. I was in my first apartment without a roommate, which had partial walls made of shelves. I was in bed around 3 a.m. when my door opened, and I heard a man come in, and then nothing. Time passed, and I was scared to make a sound. I couldn't see him from my angle. I didn't know if he was there to rob me or SA me or worse. After what seemed like forever and nothing happened, I got the nerve to call 911 and whispered there was an intruder. The police came and removed the passed-out drunk guy who'd meant to go back into the party at an apartment a few doors down. Needless to say, I was a lot more careful about locking the door after that. I was outside smoking a cigarette at night next to the garage of a house we were renting. Somewhere around the garage were a few thin metal poles, maybe 4 feet tall, half an inch diameter. I'm not sure what they were for. Maybe at one point they held up saplings or marked the perimeter of the garage. Anyways, it was dark and I was high, and I didn't realize I was standing right next to one of these poles. I bent down fast to snub my cigarette out of the ground, and the pole I was standing next to pushed its way through my teeth and jabbed the back of my throat. Oof. That's right. I fellatiated the pole and gagged on it. I had a bloody hole in the back of my throat for a week. I'm lucky I didn't get an infection. And I always thought, what if I had been a few inches off and it went into my eye instead of my mouth? I was about 10 years old, so this was 2016, 2017-ish. I'm home alone, my mom's gone to work, and my dad has gone to take my older siblings to school. I was sick, and everything went weirdly quiet. My house at this time was surrounded by thick woods, so there were always birds chirping or trees rustling in the wind. It was never quiet like this. I remember getting so creeped out that, even though I was sick, I got out of bed and went to the living room to turn on the TV in order to distract myself from it. And for some context, the first thing you see after going down the stairs was the front door. Right from there is a hallway, and walking down that straight ahead is the living room, and the kitchen is on the right. Both doors into the living room and kitchen were double glass doors. They were absolutely massive, too. You know what else is massive? There's also a set like that leading from the living room directly into the kitchen. I hope that makes sense, because I can't explain it better. I go straight to the living room, and I just watch TV for a bit. Eventually I want some water, so obviously I go to the kitchen and freeze. Just ahead of me, completely motionless, is a woman. She was stood in between the counters and dining table in a way that blocked me from running to the door connecting to the hallway. Her skin was as pale as the white kitchen tiles behind her. Her hair was almost as black as her eyes. Well, the holes where her eyes should have been. From those 2 holes, those horrific black lightning marks were expanding out of, slowly turning gray the further they got from her eyes. She wore a dirty, short white dress with several tears, especially near the bottom. The bottom of her arms and legs were a dark grayish blue, which slowly faded back into her white skin as they neared the top. Her hands were held at weird angles. Worst of all, she was smiling right at me. An unmoving, cold smile. She towered above me height-wise, and even though she had no eyes and she was looking straight ahead, so not eye level with me, I could tell she was just looking right at me. It would have honestly been more comforting if she was frowning, but no, she was smiling. I genuinely don't know how I managed to move after seeing that, but I know I barricaded myself in the living room with my cat. He didn't help me stay calm. He was frantically running from wall to wall and up and down the curtains, something he never does. I remember begging him to calm down whilst I crouched in a spot I was certain meant I couldn't be viewed from either of the glass doors. It was so overwhelming, like I was being suffocated by a person just because I knew they could be trying to look at me. I think I just played Mario Kart to distract myself from all these emotions until my dad got home. Thanks, Mario Kart. Back then I was certain it was real, but now I'm 99% sure I was hallucinating. I was sick at the time, and the night before, like an idiot, I had been watching PewDiePie playing horror games. I think specifically one where you go around a hallway a bunch of times, and there's a fetus in a sink. I only remember that one because I saw the fetus. I slammed my computer screen down and kept repeating, "That's not real, that's not real," until I could fall asleep, only for the scariest thing that's ever happened to me to occur the next day. And I know now that none of that was real, but the fear my 10-year-old self felt seeing that has stayed with me ever since. I feel sick just thinking about that game because in my mind they're forever connected. Sorry, I don't remember what it's called. I was about 12 or 13, home alone and fully aware I was home alone, and no one came home because I was in the living room and the door would be facing me, so I'd see if someone came in. I was home alone, and I heard cabinets slamming and my mom came in prepping for dinner. When I went around the wall to look and talk to her, No one was there. After that, when any noise happens and I'm alone, I'll either go to sleep, turn music on, or go out of the house. Absolutely terrifying.
I just bought the house I currently live in. Nothing in the house except for 2 lawn chairs and a TV at the time of this incident. My wife went to get us some fast food. I went to use the bathroom in the master bedroom. The house has hardwood floors. Footsteps are very distinct and recognizable. So the wife left. I'm sitting on the throne. The door wasn't completely closed as there was an issue with the alignment of the latch, but it was up to the frame or trim. Maybe 5 to 10 minutes passed. Suddenly, I heard footsteps start at the end of the hall. The steps clump all the way down the hall, turn and come into the master bedroom, and stop at the bathroom door in front of me. The door opens about 1 foot to 1.5 feet. I'm sitting directly behind that door, and then nothing. No sound, no nothing. I stand up, pull my pants up, and step into the bedroom. Nothing. Look down the hall, nothing. Scour the house for anything, nothing. All doors and windows were shut and locked. I called my wife and asked her if she had come back to the house and left again. She told me no, and that she was about to head back home from where she went. Happened 8 years ago. Remember it like it happened an hour ago. I was in a Walmart bathroom when I was about 14. I just finished and went to go wash my hands. When I went to the sink, a lady was already there, washing her hands as well. It was just us two. When I was almost done, the lady looked at me and said something to me. She had a very bad speech impediment, so I didn't really know what she was saying. It was something along the lines of me being a redhead. I'm used to people commenting on it, so I kind of just smiled and said thank you, but she kept saying it. Eventually, I could make out what she said. I've never seen someone your age with that hair color before. I thought that was a bit weird, so I just awkwardly smiled and tried to leave. She was already getting closer, and I was getting uncomfortable, so I wanted to leave as soon as possible. But then she stopped me. She touched my hair. It was so creepy. She stood in front of the door, blocking me from going out. At this point, I was really nervous because I didn't know what she was going to do or if she was going to hurt me. So I tried to just push past her. Eventually, she moved to the side. As I'm leaving, she's just staring at me as I leave, with her hand turning as I left. I booked it the hell out of there. I still don't really know if she meant to creep me out since I think she had a condition, so I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I was a minor and I just didn't feel safe at all. It isn't that crazy, but it's what I thought of immediately. My boyfriend and roommate were both not home. It was very rare for me to be alone in our apartment. I didn't really want to venture outside alone at night due to living uptown and having a past experience where I had been messed with or approached when I go out on my own. But I decided I wanted to make myself a little drink to settle for the night, and I needed a mixer. I grabbed some change and decided to walk to the soda machine across the complex. On the way back to my apartment, a man started following me and making noises. I lived on the road outside of the complex on the 2nd floor. When I got to the end of my staircase, he started running at me and growling. He chased me halfway up the stairs. Thankfully, I was able to quickly unlock the door and get inside, but holy shit. I have no idea what his plan was or why he was growling. I called the cops, but he was gone by the time they got there. This was the 2nd time I was chased outside of my apartment, but the first time I was chased upstairs. It was terrifying for me because it was the first night I was alone in a while. What if he actually caught me? What if he got inside our apartment? I had nightmares constantly after that about a man trying to get into our apartment. I felt super violated on my own turf, and it messed with me mentally for a good few months. Childhood friend wanted me to stop in and feed their dog a couple of times a day while they were on vacation. Told me where the food was and gave me instructions. I was like 10 years old. My mom was outside in the car waiting while I ran in to feed the dog. Went inside and said hello to the dog and dumped her food in the bowl. Turned around to fill up her water bowl when suddenly the basement door opened and some random dude appeared. Scared the shit out of me. He was all scruffy looking and was wearing a flannel and whatnot. He told me they had told him to watch the dog while they were gone. I'd never seen this dude before in my life. I was always hanging out at my friend's house, and he was giving me the creepiest vibes. I said, "Oh, okay,"
and left. I didn't come back to feed the dog again after that, and didn't say a word to my friend about it either. I'm sure he was just as startled as I was, but he definitely gave me the creeps. About 8 years ago, I was home alone. I had just started dating my now husband, but at the time I had this friend that was obsessed with me. I started slowly cutting that guy out of my life. He was not a fan of my new man because he's a foreigner, according to him, but really it was jealousy. One night, I'd had enough of his endless angry texts. I told him I was done and to stop contacting me, blocked him on everything, and went back to whatever I was doing. Later that night, I was watching a movie, and friend shows up at my house. I cracked the door open to tell him to his face to cough, and he shoved my door open, grabbed me and tried to kiss me while pushing me back in my house. I screamed, and my neighbor who was out smoking came running over and got the guy to leave. It was the last time I ever saw that guy, luckily, but I really thought that my time had come, and he was going to kill me. There are so many things I cannot pick just one, but I want to contribute. I woke up the last week of my pregnancy feeling so tired and not wanting to go into my doctor's appointment. I just wanted to go back to sleep. I'd never felt that way before, and I had also never been pregnant. I just assumed I was being a wuss. I got dressed and went to the hospital, and the doctor took one look at me and said I was needing my child that day, and they were sending me right down to the delivery room. Was anybody with me? They would call me an ambulance. They were very, very calm as they were saying this, almost excited like, "You're going to meet your baby today, aren't you happy?" But all I wanted to do was go to sleep. I thought, oh my goodness, really? I'm going to have to go through labor? I'm so tired, I don't think I can do this. It turns out that pulling feeling of tiredness was me dying. As I was making my way out of the OBGYN, the nurses, who had known me since I was young, whispered in such a worried voice to each other, not meant for me to hear. I have visual impairment, so I can actually hear things most can't. They said in a devastated voice, "The baby will make it, she will not." I started fighting against the tiredness, but it was no use. They called in the hospital as an emergency surgery. They hooked me up to oxygen as soon as I got to the hospital. They didn't know that I knew. I was so scared, thinking I didn't even plan to have this baby. I wasn't done. I was in school. They just said he's going to be fine. They said I'm going to die. I couldn't even go through labor because they had to get him out of me so quickly. The surgery took less than 12 minutes. According to my family, I was incredibly swollen and pale. I was cold to the touch. My brother fainted twice out of fear. When they pulled my baby out of me, he wasn't making a sound. I was fading out of consciousness, but also shaking uncontrollably. They thought I was cold, but it was the epidural symptoms because they had to give me more than normal. I was gripping onto the sides of those IV stands, and that was the only sound in the room besides the doctor's breathing and mine. No crying, just clack, clank, clack, clank. Suddenly my brother screamed. Why is he not crying? Is he dead? And they said, no, he's just sleeping. We have to wake him up. Boy, was he pissed, lol. I couldn't even hold him for a picture afterward. My blood pressure was so incredibly high, and I gained over 150 pounds during my pregnancy. Whoa. It's all fun and games thinking about dressing them up, but when you're pregnant for almost a year, and there's a gigantic chance you could die at any moment, and they're going to save the baby first, it truly is a complete selfless act. I was alone in my room. It was 6:30 a.m., and in the morning everyone else was asleep in my apartment. I woke up abruptly later. As I was on my way to the toilet, I heard loud screaming, someone saying, "Help me, help me." English is not even our first language, and the person was saying, "Help me." I was young at the time and was like, what the? In panic. Jumped back onto the bed and hid. About a minute later, the screaming stopped. I gathered up the courage to peek out of my toilet exhaust window thingy. It had a view of the outside hallway. I saw nothing. Granted, you probably wouldn't be able to see shit from that place, but yeah. Then I proceeded to open my apartment door to see what it was. In my head, I thought someone got killed, but I didn't find anything at all, and all the other apartment doors were closed, and nothing seemed wrong. I was scared to go into my room toilet for a week. I thought it was a ghost or something. Even to this day, I don't know what the F it was, but it was scary for sure.
Was at a birthday party for a girl my school moved out of province. We were 12. It was a small farming town, and we were 5 girls playing in the park near her house. There was a small water park area. We all decided to play in the water and were all wet, shoes off and everything. No one in sight but us, so we were having a blast. It was a park on the edge of town, and there were a few houses, and it overlooked a big cornfield. A crappy old gray Honda with a man kept circling around the park slowly and was staring at us through his window. He circled maybe 3 times, and I was on alert, but my friends didn't seem to think much. Well, finally, he came back around and parked right beside the water park area. He was a very creepy-looking 30-year-old guy with glasses, looked around nervously. He looked unwell, was wearing a white wife-beater and torn jean shorts. He got out slowly and approached, saying nothing. Then as he got closer, he suddenly bolted toward my friend of smaller stature, as if to grab her. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Pedophile, run!" And all the girls ran for their lives away from him. He chased us through the park, and thankfully we lost him as we ran into town. We were all barefoot and wet. I had never been so scared in my life. Our parents went back for our shoes later. A single shoe was missing. Called the police and never heard any updates following the story. My parents never let me go visit her again. I was brisk walking in a park late in the evening around 8 p.m.ish. Now, it's a huge park, like the largest one in Asia area-wise. I reach an intersection where 3 paths go toward much busier parts of the park, where you could find people strolling even till 9, but one of them goes a bit off toward a lake, from where you take a long stroll around the lake and then reach one of the park's exit gates. It's more or less isolated at that hour of the day. I kinda like isolated and peaceful walks, so I took the path. Halfway through it, there comes this area where there's a bamboo tree for like 800-meter stretch. I entered the stretch, and around 2 minutes into it, I suddenly had a feeling of impending doom. The thought that crossed my mind was, what if I die here? And the immediate response my brain gave was, you'd have no one to save you, bro, since there's not a single soul around. Suddenly my heart started pumping way too fast, like 100 beats per minute, and I had a feeling of tightness in the chest. I felt like I was losing my breath, and suddenly had this dizzy feeling of sorts. I knew I was going through a panic attack, been having them for like 5 months now due to personal reasons, but this time I was all alone with no help. Suddenly I saw this man behind me who was traveling by the same path. Didn't want to end up looking like a freak or scaring him, so I simply told him I'd forgotten the way to the exit gate and asked if he could help me out. Well, he was generous enough to agree, and we talked all the way through it. But yeah, it was scary AF. The feeling that I could die and would have no one to save me.